Alright, so I know that this is a very popular style of mine, so I wanted to bother recording how it is I go about doing it. So the first thing that I may as well elaborate on is how the paint layers work. So the topmost layer is the darkest color, the second layer is a darker color, the third layer is highlights for the base layer, and then the base paint is the second brightest. And you see, the way that this works is that you have two of these dark layers. I've heard this referred to as carving or casting. And you want to cut holes out of it for the sake of making it so that you can apply highlights in interesting ways. Now, having two of these shadow layers isn't as necessary as it was in the past because of the new curved decals, because when I really started doing this style and such, it was at a time where there was not a curved decal section. This is like pre-paint update. So technically speaking, strictly speaking, it probably isn't necessary to have two of these, but it can make it a lot easier, a lot more convenient, and it lets you have much more comfortable transitions between sections like this, if that is what you desire. And the main merit to doing this sort of thing is that it allows you to have really intricate sections. And you know, I like really intricate sections. So now there's this lovely piece that I've just made, where there's these brighter sections and they look good. So this is like the mechanical, how you physically do it, but not much about the process itself, which is why I have this lovely ship with a Latin name, so I will not try to pronounce it, that I am going to be painting today. I'll try to explain my thought process, but it's not something that I am super familiar with staying on top of narrating what I'm doing, so this video might be a little bit shaky, but you know, such is the price of knowledge, of learning. And the other thing is that I have not actually done this style for quite a while, so it might be a little bit rusty for me to actually get back into the swing of things. So here so one of the main things about this style is the overlapping nature of it. And we've already run into a relative issue here where these two sections want to be overlapping. And that is the main point of the style, is to have overlapping. And as you can see, these two sections do not overlap. They don't overlap in a nice, proper way, because if I were to put it so that it benefits the new pattern I'm presenting, it cuts out the old one. So what we need to do is we need to do this, and we need to do this. Now this kind of looks weird because it isn't finished yet. And that is where the massive, magnificent, beautiful section of what this scheme offers comes in. That now we can present the second shadow layer to do that. And now it's overlapping and it looks wonderful, it looks nice. It's a little bit rougher on the edges in these sections, but when you zoom out, that will not be the case to nearly the same extent anymore. So that is fine. And if you zoom out, you can already see that you don't see much of the roughness here. Though, for whatever it's worth, this can be remedied by choosing a darker color so that it blends in more. But I am not super interested in doing that, at least not quite yet. Just filling in a little bit of these sections so that it looks perfect. Now, the thing about how you go about doing this is that you want to avoid roof textures, and because you're curving all over the place, you're having all manner of fun things that you're doing, you can pretty easily maneuver around a lot of roof textures actually, which is very convenient because, as mentioned, this is the point of the style. No, I'm confusing my points. The point of the style is to look pretty, as is, you know, any style. But a nice thing about it is because it's so involved and curvaceous, you can just curl around whatever roof textures you see and don't want to deal with, because there's quite a few of those. For example, these crew quarters are often a struggle to successfully get around. So we will just go around them, and it will be easy and it will be glorious. I think, I hope. You know, you never know. Maybe we will burn and I will not even upload this video. But such is the nature of science and progress. So this section is kind of weird already because it is let me figure out how to phrase this. So this is kind of a rough section to work with because it's so cramped. And the reactor's roof textures, this is a good example of why you want to ideally paint around roof textures rather than over them, because despite the fact that we have set this up, in fact, let me just do this for a second, just so I can copy this here. Despite the fact that this has been set up properly so that it like layers, it looks nice and is flowing properly, because there's a reactor in the center of it, it doesn't come through. Like the pattern is obscured. Like the pattern has been properly established, but it's been obscured. So that is the importance of making sure that you avoid roof textures to the best of one's abilities, so as to not suffer the fate of dealing with such things. Close these because I'm insane and have problems, and they bother me, despite the fact that I'm painting right now. Okay, so the other thing is that a lot of this style is about incorporating patterns with each other and constantly flowing between itself. So if you have a pattern that's like too simple where it like stops early, then just split it off, add more pattern. No one can stop you. Wait for the game to save. And we can have that. And now we have these two sections that are going to want to intersect again. And sometimes it doesn't quite work. Sometimes it's a little bit too complicated, and it's the second layer of decals that you have, you know, you've sacrificed an entire color to have the second shadow layer so that you can do complicated things. But hopefully, ideally, it will pay off. It will be worth it. Okay, so the other thing, another thing, not the other thing, this implies there's only two things here, is that to make this ideal, I would say, you want to always have the pattern be over, under, over, under, or under, over, under, over, such that it will be overlapping and following a nice pattern. So here it is over and then under. So this section would be over. And so we can do this. And then we can do this, and this, and this. And now it is over, under, over. But now we have to go under. So we will want to do, let's see, this, because it went over, so now it goes under. Now the astute may have noticed, but now this section is invalidated. So if we want to undo this, then we will need to flip this section. And now coherence has been restored, the pattern is established, and it is safe. It looks good, I would say. Of course, it's subjective, but, you know, I will let the viewers judge as they will, as they desire to. So it's not a science, it's an art, really, like many things. And getting good at it constitutes practice. Knowing where and how you can fit curves into things can be a trial. Another fun thing is that sometimes you will want to add extra shadows, because if you can black out the sections that are not supposed to be visible, like strictly speaking, what we would want is to have all of this right here blacked out so that it is only the raised sections. But we don't have the decals to do that. We would need something like this, but mirrored on top of itself. But that we don't have that decal. So we have to accept that there's going to be a little bit of overlap. And so that makes it so that if you can use extra decals, such as right here, to separate it out, it makes it look better. It can make the illusion a little bit more distinguished, a little bit more realistic, and easy to observe. As I've talked about in other videos, it's not so much as doing things that look as though they preserve the sequence as much as it is doing as many things as possible to continue contributing to the sequence, so that it stands out as little as possible, so that it looks as though at every point that it can be, it is falling into a pattern that looks good and is consistent with the scheme, which is not always easy. So I don't like any of this section, and there's an opportunity to make it so that it has more overlap, so that there's more overlap, because a main merit is having the overlapping sections. We've sacrificed an entire color to do it, so we should get our money's worth on doing it. Trying to remember what decals is not always easy. What decals need to be put down where is not always easy. Let's invert this. Okay, so this goes under, so this will go over. You don't need to say over and under every time like I do, but it does help to keep yourself on track. So now this goes under and then over, and then this one goes over again, which is such as life. Because of how these patterns work out, it is not always consistently possible to make sure that everything will be perfect and consistent. So you might have to make concessions somewhere, you might have to make it not perfect somewhere, and how you choose to address that is up to you. Because now it can be symmetrical, and look nice in a different way to accommodate this change. But I typically find that the more lacing that you can do, the better it turns out. But, you know, personal preference. So this section is pretty filled in. You could conceivably attempt to fit more things in, such as that. But depending on whether or not you want to, or whether or not you think it looks better, it's always important to avoid getting cluttered. So I don't think that that section needs to be added, and I think that this is pretty good. It looks pretty good. Pretty adequately finished. But we can add a little bit of details, just a little bit, just a smidge, in the in-betweens. You know, if we want to, if you want to. A nice thing about having two decal layers is that you don't need to work exclusively with shadows, because you have two shadows, which makes it so I can do things like this. And now I've been afforded an opportunity, because I was messing around, to add another overlapping section. So instead of just being isolated, I can add these sections to the rest of the canvas, if that makes any sense. So this goes over, so the next one shall go under. Let's switch to this one. Let's switch to, no, not that one. This one. And working within the confines can be a little bit difficult, and making sure that you have the right fades. The fades, putting them down will complicate things, and typically I think that the denseness of a pattern is limited by what fades are in the way at the present. Because if it is too dense, then suddenly the fades start interrupting one another, and then you cannot properly set things up. So like here in this case, this is a different issue I'm moving on to. In this case, there isn't a fade that covers both sides of this. So I have this one right here, but there isn't one that has this like attached to the top of it. So what we need to do is use this fade, and then move the fading downwards out of the way so that we can accommodate it. So this went under, so it goes, no, so what I messed up is that this should go on this side. There we go. And here we want to put these down. So this fade is theoretically useful because it can be used in situations such as these, but because there's already a section being worked on here, it is just easier to do this, to push it back all the way over here so that we can work with it. Now, here is an example of it being very cramped, where we need to do this section up here. Like, this is such a cramped section that I'm not even sure if I'm like properly distinguishing things. I'm going to pause it so that those effects aren't as active. So here, if we do this, I don't think this stands out a little bit too much because it's covering the top side, not the side of it. So we want to smoothen that using different fades a little bit that wane out sooner. Because if I do this, then you can see that it looks as though this is darker, which is not really the case. Alright, now onto this. So now we have under, over, over, under. This is over, under. This is under, over. So this seems to be congruent with itself. It seems to all be aligned and working out. I'm going to revise these sections a little bit because they're fading into storage, they should probably have something that's clarifies that makes it clear that they're fading like under a storage. The issue here is that I already have a decal right here that is taking care of that. That's already illustrating something. So I can't really copy it, at least not to the same extent on the other side. At least not with this decal. So I'm going to switch to this decal, flip it, and then do that, and then mirror it. So that I think that this 2x1 stretch decal looks better, but it's not as symmetrical. So that is the front of our ship done. Very simple. Not really, but relatively simple. Now, something about the color scheme of this selection is that it uses lights as the brightest highlights. So I am going to see if I can fit those here. I can. It did not affect the shields. Paste. That is not the right color. Copy. And we can paste these here. And those will come in handy much later on. So that is one section of Saris, Cabal, Weave, style, whatever you want to refer to it as. And I think I did a decent job. So I will not, unlike a lot of my other painting styles, because this is so involved, typically it works out on the first try, and I find that it is difficult to get something that doesn't look good because it's so involved. Also, a fun thing about all the new decals and how effortlessly useful they are is that in the past, this would be a complex section that would require getting this decal, and then this is like a lot of empty space. It doesn't like properly convey it. So normally, or at least in the past, you would have to do this and kind of work that in. You could see that on a lot of my other older Saris ball ships, but that is no longer necessary because you can just simply flip other decals. Like this one, if you flip it, now coincides to that, which is nice, which is very nice. I'm going to see if this edge can be smoothed out. No, it can't. So now I want to have this section curl up here. It's kind of, some might call it a surprise that I'm using so few of the curved decals, but the curved decals work on a smaller level compared to the slopes of the diagonals and corner pieces. And those work on a larger level, where you need to, what's the word? Draw a curve over a much larger area. I would like it if I had, nope, that's not the right thing. I'd like it if I had this decal. This decal, but in the shape of armor. Unfortunately, that does not exist, at least not yet. So, we shall make do. And here, so sometimes it doesn't necessarily look comfortable or work out So like right here, I want to combine these two sections. So let's just clear everything out of the way for the time being. And if we try to bridge this gap, we can succeed to some extent. We need to switch to this because there is too little space. And then we need to do this right here. And because it's not quite finished, there. So this is a very harsh curve, is what I'm getting at. So you might want to attempt to work it out somehow. I'm not necessarily sure how. Because it's not always easy. Like, that's technically more gentle, technically speaking. And I could try adding this to make it more curvy. But sometimes the sections are just too dense for this to effectively work. So don't be discouraged because it can be very difficult to like set everything up properly. And even then, I imagine that most, if they are like watching this video, will not be like, yes, I will do it as dense as I can see Sarah's doing it on screen right now. In fact, I probably don't recommend that. I have a lot of practice with this, to say the least. So emulating this as I'm doing it, to the same extent that I'm doing it, is admirable, but probably very difficult. Now, this illustrates our next issue, that if the blank section is too wide, too large, it doesn't look as though it's really overlapping. It looks as though this section is good, but the second one is a little bit, this and this are too far away from each other, I would say. I don't know where the decal I'm looking for. There we go. So one could do that, and that does help. That does help a little bit. You could also do this or this. The issue with this is that you see this cut out, which doesn't look good, and you want to avoid that. You could do that, but then this is technically leading up and not over because, remember, if the other section weren't here, then it would just look like this, and it would just be crossing over. So that's probably about as good as it's going to get for that area. So let's copy it to the other side. Let's remove this. And now we shall do the inverse. You don't necessarily need to. You probably don't. I might myself default to the other thing, decreeing that it looks better. But I like seeing how they compare and whether or not one has more merit than the other, shape-wise. Because this is a much, much simpler thing to deal with. But it doesn't necessarily look as good, you know, because it doesn't exaggerate the curve as much. In fact, it only has this straight line as opposed to the curve that this left one has. So if I copy this, then that does look interesting. I'm going to put this here for now so that I can directly compare them. I assume that's correct. So get rid of that and place that. And now, because I've done what I just did, I can press Control Z twice and Control Y twice and compare them. And whether or not, which one you like more depends on you, but I like this one more because it makes the curve more exaggerated and noticeable. So downside to these pipes is that they are making it a little bit more difficult to connect it to patterns, because if they weren't necessarily here, in fact, I can try. I'm going to briefly cut off these so that they look a bit more natural. And then do this. So I'm crossing over the pipes, which can look but such is life. And here's an example of needing a second decal layer, because I'm cutting out the circle and I can't combine these two. So something that can work is you use the second darker color, but that is still standing out just a little bit more than I want it to, because it's like an abrupt transition. So we put those fades there, and then we could do this. And now you can hardly notice, or it's much more difficult to notice, the transition, and this is good flourish. This looks very nice, I would say. However, I don't want to keep the jump across the heat wires, so that was just a learning segment. I'm going to copy this, and copy this. I've been wanting to try these on Cabal ships. I've been painting Io for the most part, as other people may have seen at the tide pool or complained about or whatever. I haven't had much chance to actually try a lot of the new decals with new paint styles. Yes, yes, save, save, save. And this is an issue section, and by issue section I mean something that I can just repeatedly mess about with and never come up with anything that I super love. But you know, such is such is painting ships. I recommend you don't be as crazy as me about it, because it will drain progress. But you know, that's just my opinion. Here I'm trying to see what happens if I take advantage of all of this space up here, because as nice and simple as the curves were, there is still much more space here. See, this is an issue. So this is 2 by 1. So we'll have to minimize that. And we have to remove mirror because this is not symmetrical. The ship is, but the paint is not. And because we have done that transition where this outer section is the crimson paint, I am now going to go out of my way to remove all of the black paint here and replace all of it with crimson, so that it blends in for this one section that is not visible on the ship. Whether or not this is worthwhile is, you know, up to you. Maybe I just look crazy. Maybe I am crazy. That's not up to me. Okay. As I was just saying, that was crimson, so it should be crimson. And I think that this probably looks better. But the nice thing is we can compare. Okay, so let's copy all that. Now we can compare. I would say yes, it's much fuller, takes advantage of like the surface area better. A success. So that isn't visible enough, so I'm switching to a different decal that is more visible. And that's the front section done, I would say. I think. Maybe. Because typically, you can always fit in more details. It's just a matter of should you. Because that answer is not always yes. In fact, something I would recommend to a lot of newer painters is that less can very often be more. Which is an unfortunate reality, to say the least. And here I am filling out the black sections, but is it necessary, you know? I think I'm going to leave them there, but be aware, it is not always the case that you want to add more. More is not intrinsically worthwhile. More is often intrinsically worthwhile, but not always. You can degrade a ship's quality by adding too much. Yeah. There we go. I needed to invert it. Yeah. So I'm not going to do that because those are like painted sections that are using the shadows not for detail like I am for this reactor section, but for what's the word? Can I? Okay, no, that's fine. I thought I could see over the edge, over the next tiles. It's like, why is that happening? Which would be a problem. Alright, so these ions still need to be painted. So I'm going to take advantage of the pre-existing pattern to, yeah, this pre-existing pattern. I'm going to split it off and extend it, elaborate it on it. Because I can, because that is how you come up with a interwoven design, is to just repeatedly elaborate on existing sections. If you see a section that can be stretched into the space where you're already occupying, then I would say you typically should, because that way it will look good. Typically, oftentimes. I love this decal. I love you, triangle wedge 8th. Rarely useful, but you would be sad if you didn't have it, so I'm glad I have it. So this doesn't actually weave into anything, at least not presently. If I wanted to do that, I would have to, where is it? Do this. No, what I need to do is invert this. Yeah. Now I can connect these two. Let's see. Nope. Connect these two. And here there is not going to be a decal that properly suits our purposes, so we shall do this instead. after, I don't know if this is the case, probably not for anyone else, but after a certain point, this just becomes intuitive to me. Like, just like, yeah, of course that would go there. It's very natural, you know? Um, but it won't be for everyone. And I have several years of practice. So, probably don't be disencouraged if you can't get it as simply or easily as this, because frankly, it would be concerning and I would be jealous if you understood it that quickly. It would be quite the feat. Okay, so now I want to see if I can connect, because as mentioned, just connect the sections, just make them more and more, you know? We need this to invert, this to invert, and now I can replace this section with this one. Now we need to find a specific decal so we can invert it. Pretty sure it's here. Yes. So this is very complex, and the roof tiles are in the way. For sure. So getting this to function might be a little bit of a challenge. Let's see. Let's see. Figuring out how to arrange the decals so that it works can be quite a trial at times, I will admit. But part of the reason why I like this style of painting so much is because it's so engaging to do. Like, you don't, in a sense, you don't have to worry about the quality of your paint. The quality of your paint, because of how this paint goes, is natural. It will automatically look good. It is just a matter of whether or not you can figure out the correct combination of choices to actually carry through. And that part is not easy. Not rare is rarely easy. As you can see here, it is not wanting to come willingly, at least not presently. So I am having to move more of the paint to the reactor so that this will line up. And however, but because it's now lined up, it is coming together significantly more easily. And now the the shadows will actually resolve, which is very nice, which is very lucky. I can do this. And now we have this section. I wonder... So if you were boring, that's not the right word, but um, after you finish with the paint, you could just do this so that it's even more seamless. But in my opinion, having the extra color adds depth, and if it's the same color, if it's the exact same color, then you can't distinguish, which is something that will cause you problems. So I would not recommend making it the same color, the two shadow layers, both because it's harder and because it is less visually interesting, in my opinion. But, you know, in my opinion, and my opinion might not mean anything to you. It might not mean anything to me. Quality is subjective, unfortunately. Well, probably not unfortunately. If it was objective, then there would be one right way to do everything. And that would be a pretty unfortunate reality. This is not relevant to specifically the circular painting, the curved painting that I've been doing, but sometimes small details like these triangles are just like not worth bothering with because they're so minute and like you can't do much with them is the thing. Like you can add shine to them, you can make them glow by virtue of the brightened decals, but I don't necessarily think that them being present like this is going to make or break the ship, you know? So if I cover them back all up, were they even really there? This is a case of adding too much and it can become noise. And noise is when there is too many details so you can't understand what is happening visually. And noise is an issue I see commonly for new painters and such, where they will be so enthusiastic that they add as many decals as they can and as tight a placement as they can. And um, it has a charm to itself. Me trying to mince words so that it doesn't come off as though I'm completely just insulting the people who paint that way. But noise can be difficult to look at. It can be not appealing to some. I certainly know that avoiding noise is a difficult issue. I'm I I remain improving at painting even now, and avoiding noise is a very, very common issue. It is not an intuitive thing to try and handle. Alright, so that section's done. And I took so long with it because I was trying to explain what the deal was. It took quite some time, but that time will result in people knowing stuff. And knowing stuff is good, probably. I'm not a lawyer. Don't. Maybe knowing stuff is bad. So I think that this paint style is very fun, is very intriguing and rewarding, and I would recommend it if you think that you would enjoy it as well. It is by no means a cakewalk. It is probably one of, if not the most difficult styles to properly emulate, properly practice, but you know, um, anything worth doing requires work. So the reason that I have started doing this symmetrical section here is because, well, it's symmetrical rotationally. And having patterns that work, having patterns like this, I think generally can look very nice. Of course, I will be winding out of it. I'll be getting further from the pattern so it's not like strictly symmetrical, so it's not like just copying itself all the way through. But I find that having some symmetricity, that's a word, I'm very good at words there, especially the not real ones. Having some amount of symmetricity certainly sounds like a word. It sounds like a nice word too, such as my curse. Anyway, having some amount of symmetricity on not the spine of the ship, I think can end up looking very good. Just for no particular reason, just because I'd say so. And it can make it easier to continue let's see. Can make it easier to continue going through with the pattern, because now there's this top section which is going to be the same as this bottom one that I do not have to worry about as much. Let's see. So this is a weird section right here because we have this section going underneath the heat pipe right here. But we also have this looping section that's curving in all over itself. So right here it needs to go darker because of going under the pipe. So I kind of don't have a choice. You saw me try it briefly to do it this way. And if I turn off mirror mode and go back to it, so the only realistic thing I could try to do is this, to try and make it work out. But if you compare the two sides, the right one is very clear, whereas this is just like dark, you know. So I wouldn't go with that one. Sorry, excuse me. And now we have this lovely pattern that will be working its way up, and we can continue doing stuff with it. In fact, what I want to do, now that I see the opportunity for it, is to have them cross over one another. A lot of this is just about keeping your options open so that you can take advantage of them, so that once the opportunity presents itself, you can follow through. So here, because I provided two sections like I did right over there, as you can see, the two leading sections, and if I copy this here, now there's two lines that need to attach. And I could do the easier thing of this. That won't quite work. Let's see. So I could do this. That would be fairly reasonable. But there's space to explore of what happens when you constantly have them crisscross. And I think that the crisscrossing lends itself very well. It's probably the main source of complexity. Maybe obviously, I'm not sure. So now this is kind of an interesting dilemma. I have this section where the transition isn't perfect. So this goes over, under, over. I want to use this one. Probably need to exaggerate that shadow more so that it's actually noticeable. So this isn't a very nice curve, I would say. So we need to do something about that. We need to make it more gentle. But I'm not necessarily sure what that would constitute, because oftentimes you get plenty of weird angles, such as this. And I'm not super confident about that. I'm not super fond of it. So I will copy this section over here so that I have something to compare against. Copy the dark sections of the paint because those are necessary. And then I'm going to strip all this out and redo it to see what happens if I start experimenting a little bit more, because the transition is not as smooth as I wanted. Now, It really pays to have all of these decals. Very fond of them. I'm really glad Villa suggested them because I certainly would not have had the idea to. So it's kind of funny, having these curved sections, despite them being curved, is not always ideal, despite them being curved, which sounds silly, because this isn't like as gentle as you would want it to be. And this one isn't either, because it's still, no, what we want to do is this. Theoretically, maybe. And then we can do something like this. Yeah, 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 yeah. There's a bit of an issue. There's not much that can like bridge this gap right here. If I just do this, then it stands out. Like, I need a half-half, if that makes sense. And well, I won't be getting it, to say the least. That's a fair enough solution. But even now, it's still not quite, it's not quite perfect. And frankly, if you're doing this, I probably wouldn't worry about it that much. I shouldn't be worrying about it that much. But yet here we are. Here I am. So I'm not happy. I'm not 100% satisfied with this, but I don't know how I would go about not doing it this way. So do it this way I shall. Such is painting, you know. And if nothing else, I do like how it looks more so than on the right side. So there was a success, moderate success. Let's see, copy the shadows over here. This one wasn't copied, but this needs to be more pronounced anyway. Turn this back on. And because this is such an abrupt transition, I am adding a little bit more red there. Wires are kind of icky for this, but I found that shadowing underneath them, like I have here, works out fairly well the majority of the time. Something I like to do is if sections end up touching like this and there's not much that I can do about it, I will add shadows like such to represent depth, as in this section is lower down. It's underneath the other one. And I was already doing it before, but then I was just seeing how it looked if I switched it over. And I think I like this one more. However, not pronounced enough. Not pronounced enough. Very common issue with working with these fades is, especially when this one is so light, like this red very likely needs to be darker. But it's so much less vibrant that way, you know? It adds more contrast. Let's see. Let's compare it on this one. Paste. Yeah, it's not as fun. I don't like it as much as I suppose what I should be saying. So I will move on from that for the time being and start working on this. And having these curved armor sections is nice because you have to do, it automatically does it for you, is what I'll say. it makes it so that you can focus on just putting it down, and it kind of lends itself to what I was saying about it just being automatic. You just fill in the pattern, and it's as soon as you can fill in the pattern, then you're good, then you're solid. Which seems kind of a strange thing to say, I know, of like, but painting, you have to put it down yourself. But yes, well, you see, maybe the ship wants to be painted. Maybe it's weird that way, and it's simply my job to fulfill that. I I say weird things sometimes. You know, I understand that, and sometimes like, no, what are you talking about? I'm normal. I'm perfectly, and in this case, I can hear myself and recognize, no, not in this case, not this time. But when was there ever like points for being normal? I say incapable of being normal. Anyway, this has gone on for far too long. Um, so another a thing that I'm doing is trying to figure out how to connect, because I have different ideas of what's going on. So like right here we have a line that's coming up and it's going to curve into this. And we have this line coming up here and it's going to curve. I want it to curve into this. Like such. Maybe like, no. Like such. Because I also want it to be moving here down the shield. Because I think that looks pretty good. However, hilariously, despite using curves, it's not gentle enough. So I need to either use this or this. Probably this. Because, hilariously, despite this being like a curve that like nominally fits, it stands out. There's this flat section at the top. So to be smoother on the ship as a whole, you need to just not use it. You don't use the curves. Which seems very amusing to me. Alright, I'm gonna be honest. I have been recording this video for like what feels like weeks now. This is the fourth instance of recording that I'm doing for this video because I kept being interrupted by various things. So my thoughts and likely the tone, expression that I've been using have all probably stood out and been different. And that's why. And it's also why I am preemptively apologizing in case I repeat myself at any point because I have not been, well, I've not been consistent. I've not had the opportunity to be consistent. Very So it's been a surreal experience recording this. Like, yes, I was saying this a week ago, and now I shall continue saying words as though, as though I was just saying them. And of course, for the people viewing this video, it's going to be like, this was filmed over 4 times. It's continuous to me. And, well, I mean, you're correct. It is continuous to you, but it wasn't continuous to me. I'll tell you that much. It also makes it so that my thought process, if I had one, it's never a guarantee for in that case. The thought process, if I had one, for like how to paint, what I'm going to be painting, or going about painting, is not going to be consistent because, well, it's been several sessions of painting. And besides, trying to talk through what you're doing as you're doing it is an under-recognized difficult skill, I would say. Being able to narrate what you're doing as you're doing it is surprisingly strenuous, more so than I would have imagined before I started doing it myself for whatever reason. Like playing competitively. Like I'm kind of I can see why speedrunners in like games done quick, for example, will have someone else on hand to explain what they're doing because they certainly can't do it themselves and will likely sabotage themselves and get worse results if they even attempt to do such things. And so it makes sense to me if nothing else. That's what I'm saying. Let's copy this because copying sections is a very good thing. Because if a section works, then you can copy it and it can continue working. And it also makes it so that it is easy to paint and consumes less bandwidth, mental bandwidth, to continue coming up with new and exotic patterns. So an interesting thing is that because there's no interacting sections like on the front of this ship for these, like the reactor and the shield sections, it makes it so that you can make them symmetrical. And I have not always done this, like on Mencalanan, I believe that's what it was. On Mencalanan, it is the case that I created a bunch of unnecessary work for myself by making the sections different for no good reason. Because presumably, excuse me, because presumably I thought it looked nicer. Whether or not that's true is beyond me. Ooh, it's time for another one of these tricks. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Okay, so now that goes over. Oh boy, it won't figure out. I become more adept as I've been doing this at recognizing when you won't be able to continue an over-under pattern. Because this goes over, over, and then over, under. So there's really not much you can do here. Well, I can certainly not do that. It's hilarious that despite how many decals there are, you still oftentimes need to rely on doing this, using these shapes, because, well, there isn't every necessary decal. So you have to use the solid shapes and push the shadows out further. But I mean, I think it ends up looking nice typically. So yeah, if I wanted to, I could copy this. I could go back to this, and then I could paste this and delete that. And technically these two sections are different, but to what end necessarily? Because I believe this left section looks objectively superior, in which case it is pretty foolish, honestly, to bother whatsoever with trying to maintain the other section. Because this one looks better, and the intricacies of it being asymmetric is not going to like really be caught by anyone, I don't believe, or like will the amount of effort that I put in be appreciated for how many people will observe it, and like even if they observe it is the thing that gets me. So to what end would I necessarily massively inflate my workload? Well, not massively, but inflate it nonetheless for a subtle detail that will probably not even be noticed by most. Because I certainly could do it. And I could do it here as well, where I just have to do something like that. And now those sections are asymmetric. But to what end, you know? Is that coherent? Always a fun question. Am I coherent today? Many might point to the answer no. Anyway, yes, it is very weird to narrate what you're doing, or try to narrate what you're doing. It's nice when there's people in call, such as like in the tide pool when I'm streaming, because they can like ask relevant questions and I can answer them. So I can like teach the knowledge and be clear and be helpful. But if there isn't people to answer, it's just like, here's what I assume people will want to know. And then maybe they will and maybe they won't. Maybe they would care and they'll appreciate me answering this question, or maybe I'm just rambling and the information that I'm attempting to share is not useful to anyone. What would you do about that? But I thought that since I'm just making these ships, I may as well like record the process and see if anyone gets anything out of it, because the VODs don't seem to interest many people, but people do seem interested in attempting to learn this style. So, why not elaborate as I do it, or explain it as I do it, which I could just do in general. It's kind of a weird subject because like it's not necessary for me to make this type of content, but it's not unnecessary. There's no reason not to do it, if that makes any sense. Doing this so that the laser will get out of the way. Because I'm trying to figure out how to make him crazy cross. I quite like this strange decal. This triangle wedge 8. Always intuitively named these decals are. It has been quite useful at getting a specific sort of thing ready as necessary. Alright, so it's always weird painting ion sections because, is there anything in front of this? No. Because if you do this, then it's like, it's gonna drown out all the details. It's all like just crimson now. So to some extent, it's not even worth painting ions because they will just be completely drowned out. Like I can do this. So that's kind of why I typically go for less details over more, as such as in this case, because it will just not really amount to anything to do so, to attempt to make the details come through. Because, I don't know, look, it's very, very clear that this is not something that is visibly coherent. It is coherent, but it is also like kind of messy in regards to the visual clarity. Like I can tell there's paint here, but I can't tell what the paint is anymore. So do be aware that painting near ions is sometimes something that's just better to skip. It goes back into the whether or not there's merit in painting. There is merit in painting. Whether or not there is merit in how much you paint to avoid noise. I am going to just remove that because speaking of noise, it is getting in the way of me being able to understand. Okay, so over, under. And this is a weird section. So I could do this. No, I can't. That's not gonna work. I could do this, but that's functionally identical to this. Yeah, nobody's no ain't nobody gonna notice that. So I can just do that. So now it's over under, and then this is over again. Let's go back to fades. And let's do this. Let's do this. I mean, go to this. Yeah. This is under, over, under, which means I can just copy this. Probably. No, no, I can't. But if I flip it, I can. Yeah. And now, because these sections are where they are, I need to implement some amount of shadows because they're going under the wiring or such. Um, let's see. So this is another example of things being fairly cramped, and it's kind of getting in the way of the painting. Cause here it's just like it ends abruptly, and that's not good. We don't want abrupt endings. So it makes me think that maybe it would just be better to do that because I can't fit in the requisite amount of detail that I would want to actually accommodate that sort of section. So this is not something I ordinarily do. Like, I reserve this sort of detailing for IO for the most part, but it seems like it would fit fairly well. I made these fade. I made these fade for these sections, so I should probably do the same here. Because that's something that can look nice in front of what is right here. Yeah, that was necessary in the past, but not no longer. Because having sections darken when leading up to the ions can look nice. Or why is it? Oh, why? Oh, I removed the thermal laser. Like, is there a problem with this ship now? But no, because the ions brighten it up so much, the details is mostly lost when you actually get to it if you like see it in game. But you know, what are you gonna do about it? So that's those sections done. And I'm going to move over to these because these open areas are spooky. Actually, no, I have an idea now. These are gonna cross over, probably. It's gonna look pretty messy because they have to cross over underneath a pipe. So it probably won't look like a crossover as much as just the sections themselves disappear. I don't know if crossing over the pipes is something that I will continue doing or continue embracing. It's just something that lets one get more detail in. And whether or not that's worthwhile for the visual noise of, you know, dealing with the pipe because it stands out is, you know, up to the painter's discretion. In this case, I've been doing it, but I don't know if I will continue doing it. I think I want to have this section go to that one. There we go. Dip, dip, dip. And then I can have this section crossed over, and then it goes under. So here we have problem section. I think this will do good. And then I need to break out another very fun decal. Inverted triangle wedge 8/2. That's not the right way. That's the right way. Is it? Is it? I don't think it is. Nope, not there either. Okay, so get that one, inverse it. And I want it to... I need like a combination of this decal with the other one being this one. Because I want this to have a more gentle slope. Because that's how you get curves. That's how curves work. Or alternatively, I could do this, and that will likely simplify the process. Ooh, and then, because that is so natural, it could lead down there. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. Looks pretty good, if I do say so myself. If it would not be overly hubristic to say so. Hubris is an underrated sin. Not enough people practice hubris these days. Breaks the heart to see. I don't know why I switched to that. The fade section, the fade I just selected is already here, over there. It's a weird thing. It's weird having just like a dedicated paint section that you can dictate what you see and where you see it. Like in the past, everything was in one section, take it or leave it. And now you have to like, you could favorite everything, but presumably your workflow will be improved if it is separated such that there isn't a million and one decals all together. Never mind that like the sections themselves would be bigger, which involves scrolling. And when you think about it, just going to like basic curves, yeah, basic curves is just scrolling but sideways with a little bit more input. I wonder if you could hotkey these. Not as if I would like ever effectively learn them, but I wonder if you could, just for its own sake. Hotkeys are a very funny thing. They used to be necessary for me, or they would have been necessary for me if I hadn't gotten a funny mouse with extra buttons. Which is, you know, basically cheating. But if you can cheat and get away with it, why wouldn't you? Life, pro tips with Saris. If you can, cheat. I don't know if that's good advice, but it is advice. Whether or not you value it is up to you. So these white bumps from the heat sections, whereas you going like that, tracing together, is too standout. I don't like it. So I will simply not deal with it. I will simply ignore it and paint somewhere else. I'm taking my paintball and going home and not bothering, because bothering would constitute more effort than I'm interested in. No, it's not that it would constitute more effort. It's that it's not possible, which is a different issue, and probably a more respectable one than just giving up. That being said, giving up is also an undervalued skill. Undervalued something. So this is like a decent section. It's okay. It's what's happening. But I don't necessarily know if it is good. Like this bottom section here is very simple. I could, because I'm an insane person, cross it over like this. But that's still not good enough. I need more. Um, let's see. Right here. Okay, okay. And then if I do this, and I can blot this out because that's boring. I can replace it with circle. That's not the right place. With circle. No, circle too big. With star. Alright, 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 alrighty. So now, because these sections eventually cross over, it gives more merit to the idea of, what was I doing earlier? Of having asymmetric sections, because now there is an established pattern to follow through with, where previously there was not. Previously, it was the case that these two sections are completely disconnected. I guess they're connected here too, but it's far enough away that you don't have to heat it, is the thing. That's fun. I don't know how I'm gonna, how do I, there's not like a decal like this one. Like in this, for the other side, like I can just cheat. No, I can't. Never mind. Okay, so I would like it if there was a smaller equivalent to this so that like it would be natural, but the best I can probably do is that for each respective side, which isn't ideal. But I don't know if there's necessarily anything that would be more ideal. I could do this, but that doesn't look particularly good either. Hmm. I don't know. I don't know. I think it looks decent. I think it's acceptable. I'm not super enthused about it, but you know, such as paint. All right. Hilariously, I can just like see the curve. I can see it forming, so I just have to like figure out. I was joking earlier about the ship wants to be painted, but when you have like enough intuition about this sort of thing, it's like I can see it taking shape in front of me. I can see how the lines flow organically. Like it makes sense. It's intuitive in a way. I don't think that's like crazy to say. I think that's probably something that people have observed in their own painting. It sounds crazy. It's like Sarius is talking to the ships again. Oh boy. Maybe that's, who knows, you know? Um, not gentle enough. Not gentle enough. We must be more gentle. How I go about doing that, however, is a different question. Okay, yes, this is good. We're on the path to greatness. I am. I don't know about you guys. Might take a while for you guys. Um, but yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm going to preemptively just cut this one off right there because I do not believe that it will go anywhere or do anything. It would be very, it would be fairly difficult to um, actually get it to like cross over because there's so much shit here. I would say, I think. So I simply shan't. Um, That doesn't look great. I knew this was going to be a problematic section as soon as I said it myself earlier, like, this is going to be a problematic section. Like, I was just going to look weird because I'm painting where I shouldn't, having a crossover where I shouldn't. Man. Let's see. No, I don't want that one. I want this one. I want that, and I want this. Yeah. There we go. That looks better. Is room for improvement, as always, but you know, such as anything. There is no such thing as perfection. There is continuing to try, and there is not continuing to try. And you only improve when you continue to try and still fail. It is funny how life works that way. I mean, funny. Might be the case that funny is just like, well, it's depressing if you think about it in any other way, so I've decided it's funny. This sort of thing. Sort of coping. That's not good. I knew there was a problem with using this. I just couldn't recall what. And the problem is that there is nothing that like supports it. Like that won't work. Let's remove that. This won't work. So it forces us to use this decal right here and to push it down, which isn't an issue, but it can be an unforeseen consequence. And who doesn't love unforeseen consequences? So here, this one's going to be a little bit rougher to deal with. Maybe? Maybe. Not that one. That one? I guess not. I guess I'm just too good at this, you know? Who could have foreseen that coming? That person said they had to go and do stuff, and yet they're streaming Silksong. Not streaming, but they're playing it. They're a liar. They lied to me. Over, under, over. Okay. We're having another moment of getting really, really dense into the decals. Probably won't be an issue. So, however, this will be. Because, like I said, like, there's nothing I can do here. So I need to invert this and put this here, and it's like, I believe one can already tell that this is running out of space very quickly. Which is not good, which is not ideal. So let's do that. And I will attempt to cope with this. That's not gonna do it. I don't even know what I should put down here. At could theoretically work. And now a benefit to this whole conundrum is I can simply turn off mirror mode and do it the other way. Because the other way is not guaranteed to be more simple, but conceivably significantly more simple. And that's a benefit of being able to just like discard whatever you want whenever you want. That you can just go to the other side and do it more easily. I suspect this is still gonna be funky. Yeah. Because need to do this. However, one can probably already tell that this is going much, much smoother. I do kind of like the left section more. It feels more intuitive, but that intuitiveness comes at the price of the jankiness right here. So it can often be the case of like what looks best versus what looks cleanest. And those can be mutually exclusive. Maybe a more skilled painter than myself would simply just paint it, would simply just be good. But I unfortunately, often is the case, suffer from skill issues. I don't like doing that because if I did that over here, it would stand out, it cuts into it, and I don't like doing that with the black, but in desperate times such as this, it can be necessary and it can benefit because you're using the other section of shadow and it is mostly not noticeable. Mostly. But now, because I did that, I can do this and this. Now, if I go over here and copy paste this over here, yeah, so it fixes that issue. It just also forces it to be the case that I can only use the right section, at least if I am doing it this way. Okay, more struggles of too complex, too beautiful, too pretty in Sarasville. Maybe? Maybe it's easy. Is it easy? Is it? Okay, well the real issue is I don't know where this one's gonna go. I have no clue. So I'm gonna do some bullshit. Or sorry, that's such a useful word. Why is it a curse? Some nonsense. I suppose that's probably the best equivalent. But believe you me, this is some nonsense I'm doing. Like that's not anything. That's not paint. That's not good. If nothing else though, we made this section work. So we're just going to give up on the other one because it simply does not work as well as this one. And we have to clear out some decals because it didn't copy everything perfectly. Ta-da! I don't like those dots. I don't know if I can do anything about them to replace them though. And of course, as is always the case, there's gonna be some guy that comes out of the woodwork and is like, I love the dots. How could you get rid of the dots? I was like, well, gee, mister, I don't know. I didn't think they looked good. I was like, they were the best part of the ship. I have interesting conversations with myself. I might be crazy. Crazy? I was crazy once. They put me in a rubber room with rats. Rats make me crazy. Crazy? I was crazy once. If I was crazy, I'd do that for the rest of the video. The recording. I once saw two students go to the principal's office because they wouldn't stop. And the teacher's like, alright, guys, come on. And I was like, huh? What do you mean? We can only say these words in this sequence. I was like, do you guys want to go to the office? Crazy. Rats make me crazy. I was like, alright, guys, go to the office. And, like, it's kind of amusing, kind of dumb. No, it's not kind of, it's beyond dumb. But it was amusing, you know? Under, over. I don't like this. Let's try this. Yeah, this is a section I have um done on multiple ships now. This is a fun little segment. So under, over, because you can simply put these down to complete the circle and it still works. And you can put this and this down and this and this, and now you have loop-de-loop. There is this funny this is a very interesting decal, the fade straight offset, because it technically gives you the capacity to do this sort of stuff, but it is not the most, what's the word? it stands out a little bit, but it does let you pull off things like that. These sections are killing me. I gotta I gotta get rid of them. Um, what do I do? What do I do with this? There's like this section here. Do I blot this out and do this and do this and this and this and simply, that's not the right thing, and simply ignore it? Ignore your problems and they never existed. More great advice with Saris. It certainly looks better than like what I was previously doing. Sorry to the guy who likes the dots. I'll apologize to you personally when you make yourself known. Let's do this. This is kind of a strange section, if I do say so myself, but it works. It's functional. Oh, I don't like that this is like so much closer to that than that section. That's better, but I'm still not super happy with it. Like, well, sometimes the ship does desire to be painted. Sometimes there's sections they just really just kick you in the teeth. I was like, yeah, we could be simple to paint, but why would we ever do that? Why would we be easy and simple to paint when we could be a nightmare? I've there have been occasions where the personality of a ship is expressed by how easy it is to paint. And oftentimes I can like or dislike ships based on the ease of which that they become painted. So this one's a pretty decent ship. This one's a pretty nice ship. It's being a little troublesome, a little rebellious, if you will. But for the most part, it's coming along. It's pretty reasonable for the most part, I would say. Now it is unfortunate about these sections because these sections I cannot do anything else with. It is not possible to do anything else with. Because there is just simply not enough space. But, you know, I mean, that's the edge of the ship. You don't necessarily want that to be like the most complex section, the most prettiest, because well, it's the edge of the ship. You don't want to look at the edge of the ship. You want to look at the center of the ship, the prettiest, the most complex section of the ship. Maybe, I would say. Conceivably. So this is a funny trick you can employ every now and again of having interconnected sections that are treated as being different when in reality they're not. If that makes sense. Because this is, let's see. Because this is like an interconnected section. So it doesn't necessarily come off as super like disparate. I don't know if that's the proper application of that word. Because I don't know if this looks as though it is crossing over, is what I'm trying to get at. What I'm trying to say. So whether or not this is like a good section is probably up to a person's discretion. Let's get you. Because now we have this very amusing section where I'm having to do this because it didn't look proper. I should probably have turned off mirror mode for this. Yeah, yep. Let's see. Because I was doing this, because previously it was like this, but this is not a straight line. Because like the arc clearly shows that it is going here, but that can't be expressed in this paint. Not really. Probably. Or at the very least, it's difficult to express it in the paint. But I think it's interesting. It's something I've not done before, this specific pattern anyway. Like a lot of the time, um, it will be the case that there are tried and true patterns that have worked, that do work, so I like to use them. For example, this loop-de-loop. But trying new things is good. Shockingly. Completely unintuitively. Trying new things. Pretty good. Would recommend. Man, I'm sarcastic jerk sometimes, even to myself. Um, so this is an interesting thing I'm attempting to do right here, where it will lead into this, but this section will just come at it straight. I wish someone would come at me straight. Anyway, this is under, over. I can copy this section over here. That is not the right way that should go. So this is like, it makes it more subtle, but if you zoom in real close, it's not the most subtle. But it does help. Probably the only reason it looks as good as it does there is because of the barracks beneath it. I think I can actually just do this. Yeah. And there doesn't need to be any lighter decal there. Loop-de-loop. If I straighten this out, no. So that's a gentle slope. If I do this, would this work? No. No, no. No, no, no. So there's sometimes sections that just don't get, that aren't possible to necessarily fill, which is unfortunate, but often, you know, just to be expected. So I guess I could do this, and that like adds to it, makes it so that it's not filled in. But like right here, this section has been bothering me in the back of my mind the entire time. But what do you do about it, right? Like there's nothing to do about it. Because this section isn't painted, I can actually change it, and I can copy, copy. There we go. place these here and there. Probably be working with mirror mode. Paste color. And now I can fill this area with I can fill this area with some color. Copy, paste. This will copy pasting it like that will actually save the orientation of the light, so I recommend doing that if you ever have, you know, lights that need orienting. Yeah, orienting. So we are certainly getting closer to the end now. And all that's left is the thrusters. And thrusters for this style are surprisingly rarely problematic, at least for me. You know, those who aren't good at this might struggle, but me, no, I jest. Nope. Anyway, it is fun to, cause like all you need to do is ignore the roof tiles. Yeah, just paint past the roof tiles. I have an idea. Just a brief second. Um, just a second. We'll get back to the thrusters. Okay. It's surprisingly easy to deal with thrusters with this style because of how because all you have to do is avoid these bright orange sections, and then it will be largely good and such, which I was not really anticipating when I started like doing this. The thruster sections would be not a problem, because like when you look at it, it's just like, oh yeah, that's gonna be rough, that's gonna be the hard section, and in most circumstances you'd be right, but there's a certain flow to it that I find that it just works. As a knowledgeable but maybe not scrupulous man once said, it just works. And all one has to do is figure out how it will work the best. It's kind of interesting working with these curves because in the past you would be forced to cut it off early here. In fact, I still might do that, but now you can stretch it out if you want to, because if I curve it like such, then it will be symmetrical, and well, symmetry isn't always like inherently its own reward, but oftentimes it can be a reward. It can be good. That one's gonna be a little bit sketch because there isn't a decal that fits into that very nicely. And I feel as though there could be maybe one more line. This feels a little bit simple. Like there is still space to do stuff, is what I have in my mind. Though, it is certainly getting to the limit of... It's certainly already at the limit of what you can do here. Alright, so... under, over, over. Yes, saying it out loud is absolutely mandatory part of the process. It's... I just can't... I can't paint if I don't say under, over. It's absolutely mandatory, and if you do this, then you too must say under, over spastically like a maniac, such that you can recall where it is that you need to do the thing. Strictly mandatory. Absolutely necessary. By all accounts. Well, because this is evenly spaced, I can do that, and that does look acceptable. This thruster is not getting much love, but I don't know how I could give it more love. Kind of an issue. If I do that, that's not super noticeable. If I do that and declare this, and do this, and do that, then that looks decent. I'm not in love with it. Let us undo everything I just did so I can compare. Yep. I think that looks better. I think that is better. I can even flourish a little bit by doing that. Should I? I'm really into the niche details now. So this isn't necessarily quite as filled out and exotic as I want it to be, but I think these are fairly good results. I think that this is a very decent ship, even if it's not quite as overwhelming as one would desire. Over, under, harm. Mirror mode is off. We can do this. Pro tip, this is probably unnecessary. Most people would just, you know, accept the goodness that they've made. But I am inefficient is what I'm gonna say. Inefficient is the best way to describe what it is that I'm doing. The only way, truly. Under, over, over. So what's up with this? It's strange. Let's see. Okay, so if this one is that, then I want it to be the other way around. And this is harder to do, especially like you could probably tell based on how long it's taking me to figure out. And that difficulty comes from the fact that the circle right here, as you can tell, is kind of infringing on the space a little bit, which is not ideal, but kind of unavoidable. So that's the difference. I don't. I think the left side's better because when I zoom out, I can't tell what's going on here, whereas I can because this is more pronounced. So I think this left side is superior. Copy, paste. Get rid of all the extraneous. Yeah. Yeah. So now I think we're done with this phase. Finally. It took forever. And now we get to the gleam, the highlights. And this is arguably one of the most important parts because the ship depends on it to have any amount of depth. And that depth is kind of important. It's, you know, it's kind of the whole point of doing this, of doing it this way, of having two shadow layers, is that so we can make the shine whatever shape we want it to be. That's like the absolute main merit to this style. So we have to take advantage of it. We want to take advantage of it. We're painting it this way so that we can take advantage of it. And it would be wasteful to not do it. So despite this being like the quickest process, it's also kind of like the most nebulous. Is it the quickest? I don't know. This is definitely the most nebulous though, because it can be difficult to tell what is done, what looks good, and is the part I feel the least qualified to instruct about, to make recommendations for, because I'm going to be honest. Sometimes it look good, sometimes it don't. Like here, it don't. Why? You need to ask someone smarter than me. Someone more experienced than me, which you might be hard-pressed to do. Because it's, you want to be gradual, you want it to be gentle, always. That's been a recurring theme of this video, of this extended monologue. But we want it to look natural. And because this is the shiny part of the ship, this is all presenting towards a light source that is presumably in front of it. And if we aren't careful, it will look weird. And that would be very bad. We want it to look beautiful. Beautiful and glorious and divine. And if we mess it up, then it will be none of those things. So the thing I try to do is to let's see, try to recognize what parts are like higher. And you'll notice I turned mirror mode off, but because like right here there's shadow over here, but this section is raised, so it would not be good, it would not do good to make it symmetrical. It wouldn't fit. So it extends the work, but this time it's necessary. This is kind of in the way visually. And having stretching decals is a huge boon in this regard for this activity. And there are some sections where you just don't want anything, or you want very, very minor, such as that. Because you run the risk of it blending together. Like, you need to be very concerted. You need to put it where it matters most, and that can be a difficult undertaking. And you need to make it fade gradually, nicely. It's more difficult, I think, universally for these smaller sections. So let's move on from them. And you want it ideally to be like the highlights never touch shadow or are near shadow, but that can be harder said than executed. Harder said than done. Harder done than said. Is that a phrase? I feel like I'm trying to reference something. Anyway. So oftentimes it does become necessary to make the shadows touch. And that's okay. That is okay because it's a part of the process. like here the shadows are touching, but that's because they're in different sections, so it's okay. Because I inverted this section, I do need to fix this. Sorry for the slight delay. Does that look better? See, I think that looks better, but it requires having an under, and an over, under. Well, if I do this, it's over, under, but then under, there. So I guess I can accept this. This looks better. Looking better is important. Strictly following the set of like under, over is nice and all, but does not need to be like zealously heated. Now here's the one example where I'm not gonna do it in a normal way, and that's because we already have it fading out, so we will not want to put it as normal. We don't want to follow the same basic lighting patterns. I'm going to remove you. We have to remove mirror mode because these are asymmetric once more. And I can't really tell what's going on because this is such a dense area. We're gonna need this hilariously. And I think that's good. I think so. I'm pretty sure. Pretty sure. I'm gonna do this. No. I need it to be fading out here because it's crossing over the wires. So fading out there is important. And as you can see, it's coming into focus. We can see the solar curves, we can see the highlights, and it's gaining texture, it's gaining shape as I work. And that is exactly what you want. It is the whole focus of doing this is to make it pop. To make the brighter sections stand out more. Yes, the brighter sections. But the brighter sections are not naturally brighter. The brighter sections are brighter because we're making them brighter. That's what we're doing right now, is we're making them brighter. We're choosing what sections to raise and highlight. And by doing this, it makes it so that we can give depth to the ship because, for example, like if we turn this off, it's still pretty good. It's still pretty flat. It's still pretty... I had a thought of what I wanted to do to show this off. So I will remove that briefly. Now, if we do this, and then this, and then this, that's what's going on, guys. I see, there we go. Okay, cool. So this is a very simple shape. You might have seen similar such things in Mindustry. Mindustry has a very distinct style that I quite enjoy emulating, and this is a very simple demonstration of using paint to grant additional texture, because now we can tell that this side is the darkest and they're slanted, so this is a raised section, and it's a very simple demonstration, but this is what we're doing as a whole. So if we turn this off, it makes it so that we know that this stuff is raised higher. It's because it's going underneath this and then coming back up, and we know that this is higher than this because it's going over it. But we don't know what of this is higher or the texture of this is all. It's very flat. So when we do this, we know that this is shiny, this is brighter, this is showing towards the light, and this is like fading away, it's curving downwards. So it's a way to add additional texture with a without adding like actual blocks, without having to commit to changing a large part of the shape of the ship, I would say. So we can delete that. We can restore. I like having a complete set of shadows for the most part. It's not like necessary or anything, it just makes me happy. So the next thing is we want these lights to be present. Now this does weaken the armor and whatever, and in this case it might necessitate removing stuff or changing the shape, but that's okay because this is more of the same. This makes it pop more. This makes it so that this is the brightest, the glowiest, the shiniest. And it makes the already bright sections even brighter. It makes it so that we can tell that this is the absolute brightest section forwardmost of the ship. And it makes it so that you can tell what parts are like the brightest, and it's typically at the front and on armor. For maybe obvious reasons. This is not a good section for paint, but I will get to that later. And so an issue here that I have is that if you make the paint sections too large, you don't have any context. You can't tell that this is brighter, it just looks yellow. It just looks like yellow because there's no red nearby it to give it depth, to give it comparison. So you can't just flood the front sections in yellow. You can't flood a section no matter how bright, no matter how close to the front with yellow, because it will drown everything else out. And it will... and then it like loses depth, ironically. By adding too much shine, you get less shine. So you have to use it sparingly. And that's why I was saying this was an issue, because now we have this section where where no matter what I do, it's just this large section. So this is why on built-in ships, it is nearly always the case that they will have broken up sections somehow, some way. Because broken up sections makes it so that you can continue having the depth and texture and paint without having to worry about the... what's the word? Without having to worry about the lack of context, the lack of depth that comes as you keep pouring more and more into it. Because if a section is small enough, then that will just never come up. That is not going to work because of that, so I need to do that. And I'm not perfect at this, because I'm going to zoom out and there's sections that I don't like that just don't contort very well. Like, I think this section is great, this center section, because it's relatively simple to work with and not dense. And right here, the roof textures of the shields and such are a problem. And because of how slanted these sections are, it can be difficult to tell if something should be raised. Because if I shine a light here, how do you know if the light is going to come from here or here, especially when this section is lower? So I could try this too. But it's a little bit awkward. It's not just a little bit, it's very awkward. So this is probably the biggest issue that I actually still struggle with, is making this not a problem. I don't know, this front section, it's just, I'm not satisfied with it, but there's not much I can do. At least I think. Maybe if I really stuck to it and tried for hours and hours, I could come up with something that I do like, that I do appreciate. But I don't know. It's an exercise in futility, I would say. You can come up with something better. However, what will it cost? Way too much time. And in that time, I can finish the rest of the ship. I can get started on another ship, etc., etc. Now here is something interesting, where this looks too, like this stands out because it's too abrupt. So like you need to stretch it, you need to give it more organic, because if it's just this, then the transition is just, it goes from yellow to red. And that's not good. We need it to be organic, we need it to be natural. So replacing paint such that that is achieved, that naturalness, that organicity. Yes, that is a word. We're going with that. The organicity of it is preserved, is maintained, is created. All of these wonderful things. Because if I have this big section, and it just briefly, like you can, surely one can tell that this is just too sudden. So we want to stretch it out, or we want to hide it by putting it in a curve like that. And now it looks better, I would say. It looks more natural. It maintains its organicity. I'm very good at coming up with words that are not real and will probably never be real. Let's be honest. This reminds me, I quite liked a book when I grew up. It was about a group of students who were saying frindle instead of the word pen as just some sort of like rebellion. I don't even know. It's stupid trends. This is back when I believe the setting is before like phones were really a thing. So it was like teenagers and kids have to keep themselves occupied with dumb shit somehow, you know. Anyway, and it's just like, for the sake of it, why don't we just call things what they're not? Why don't we just come up with new things? And I think that really resonated with me to some extent, based on, well, gestures widely. One can probably intuit what I'm talking about. This is a fun issue where I can't really put paint down without it disrupting. Like, I need to highlight the hyperdrive, but it's disruptive to these sections. So that's probably good. I definitely recommend the fade straight half is probably the most versatile and useful decal in the entire game. It does so much, and if you are ever struggling, consider slapping it somewhere, slapping it everywhere. It may just fix it. It's fixed it for me. But you know, this fixing could be an exaggeration. It doesn't necessarily always solve the problem, but it can suppress it. It can give you greepling and a little bit of complexity and depth without being too much of an issue. Now here is something interesting. Despite these being at the back of the ship, we want to highlight them because otherwise it would be too simple. Too simple. And that is also not good. The lights that are crimson, I don't even remember setting those down or why I set them down, are messing with this. Kind of an issue. Let's do this. Yeah. Now this is a doozy. Because we have to, excuse me, because we have to have this section be highlighted, it is now presenting a problem that we can't highlight the edge of this, which means that our cutoff point is right here. So we can do that. That's pretty good. That's pretty decent. I don't know about this star. I added it to fill in the space, but I don't know. I don't know. You know, it's so nebulous because no matter what you do, you're not gonna get perfection. You're not gonna get some guy coming out of the woodwork and is like, this is perfect. This is beyond compare. There is no way you could have possibly improved this. That's never gonna happen for anyone for any form of art. So you're left with the fact that you now have to decide whether you like it this way, if it's better this way, if it's more popular this way. But even then, your mood can change. I've hated ships that I thought were like, this is some great, great shit that I've made. And then when I wake up tomorrow, I see that I'm halfway done with it. I was like, what was I smoking? I don't smoke, but I must have been on something to think this was good. And if you make a beautiful ship or a garbage ship and you proclaim it as thus, regularly I've been told, actually, this is my favorite. I love it. I think I might have brought this up already. But suffice to say, quality is subjective. So this is a very long-winded way to say that the star here, it could be good. That's it. It could be good. See, there's something of an issue with all of these sections here because I feel as though they are not blending very well. So we need less yellow. We need to be more subtle with it, I believe. Now, some might say that's not my strong suit. They might be correct. They might have a point about that. But I will never let that stop me. I believe I just made that worse. We need subtle transitions. Yeah. Alright. Nice, preserve that. Alright, that's presumably fine. I'm pretty sure I made sure that was fine. Because these just fade away into nothingness, I think I want to contribute more fading. Because we want natural transitions everywhere, both for the gleam, for the shine, for the highlights, and for the shadows as well. Because abruptness is very good at disrupting your paint scheme of what you're trying to do. So I think it's important to keep in mind that you want to avoid abruptness. You want to, at least when you're doing this, for other ship types, monolith, fringed, whatever, for those, who cares? It doesn't matter. This irrelevant advice to those. But when you're doing this Cabal style, it is all about subtlety and transitions and gentle sloping curves. You don't want many hard edges, or if you do have hard edges, you want them to be sloped into. They want to come to a point that's led into, that's telegraphed. Telegraphed is an excellent word for this use case, if one can glean the meaning of what I'm trying to say. Anyway. So for the Cabal, the way I paint Cabal, it is all about that. And it's a different like philosophy entirely, I would say, of how one goes about painting to reach these, to achieve these effects, these visuals. And I mean, like naturally, intuitively, nothing else really looks like it. At least that I make. The things I make don't look like this because it's such a specific thing that I'm doing, and it's different in interesting and specific ways. I don't necessarily know what my point was. I might have forgotten. Yeah, well, let's try flipping these. Yeah, I knew that section was going to be a problem. This doesn't look half bad though. Let's try shortening that. Yeah, it's well, it's about what I expected. But I think we made. I think that do has been made. We've made do. We've come up with a solution to this quandary. Let's do that, and we can try filling the rest of this, and we can get the last section here. And I think that is the ship largely done. I think this stands out a little bit too much. We want that to be. Let's see. Is that better? Let's do this, and then this, and then this. And this is exactly why it's such a problem. Because I can't tell. It is so zoomed out. And we can paste this. Let's get that green line out of the way because it's distracting. I think this is such a minor detail. But, you know, minor details is how these ships, you know, look pretty, how they end up working. So I believe that these sections right here stand out more because there's nothing filling them. There isn't even roof textures. It is just corridor. So there's nothing there, and it kind of stands out a little bit. So I wonder if taking advantage of this section interconnecting it a little bit, and this way we can introduce a little bit more nuance, a little bit more into it. No, we want this one. We want this one. And this will absolutely not just like solve the problem. It will just change it. And it's too far away, so I don't think it's worth doing that. But I think it was worth trying. A lot of my painting is it worth trying? No? Well, now we know. And like doing stuff like this is coming up with it, coming across it is strictly experimentation. What if I just painted weird? And then I come up with this, and then people tell me it's their favorite, is the best paint I do. So, if nothing else, if there's no takeaway, and you don't want to try doing this yourself, then my lesson, or the thing I do want to share, is experiment. Always experiment. Have fun. Definitely have fun. Having fun is important. If you're not having fun, then why are you bothering? Frankly. But yeah, that is that ship. Still not going to say the name. And yeah, I think that's about it. I think it looks pretty. I think it's functional in combat. I don't know if it's good, but it's definitely functional. Strong, functional ship. Good, great, functional. It flies and doesn't kill itself by firing its weapons. At least not yet. That could always change in a patch. It probably will change in a patch. Either that or command points will be raised again, and I'll have to probably sacrifice this for another to move this there. Whatever. I'm rambling. As if I say that as if it's not the thing I've been doing this entire time. Anyway, I hope that this has been enjoyable, appreciable, and that you have a nice day.